If you hear mysterious noises and sounds, if you hear your name called when there's no one around, keep going, dear listener. This story is for you. I hope it will accomplish what I wrote it to do. In these words, you will find all the tools you'll need so that when you're faced with unimaginable things, you won't react with fear, as most people do. You'll be equipped, calm, and able to see the truth. My best, Hedy. This is What We Keep Hidden by Nicole. Chapter 10. Market. Hedy, you think you can stop at the store on your way home from Betty's today? We're out of olive oil, Mrs. Mom asked as I came down the stairs into the kitchen. Sure thing. Usual brand? I asked. Yep, she answered emphatically as she pulled her wallet out of her purse and gave me some dollars. Here, this should be more than enough. Thanks, I said as I grabbed my raincoat off the hook. Ready, Lucy? A yawning, half-awake Lucy slowly stumbled towards me before shaking her head. Aw, too tired to go with me today? Sure could use some company, though. She'll perk up when she sees Humphrey, Mrs. Mom said as she poured herself a cup of coffee. At the mention of Humphrey's name, Lucy perked up and wiggled with excitement, wagging her tail back and forth vigorously. Well, that made a difference, I said as I struggled to clip the leash onto Lucy's vest with her squirming. Knew it would, Mrs. Mom said. Only when she loves cuddling more than you is that weird judgmental cat. Once we left, it was difficult to keep up with Lucy's excited pace, but we made it to Betty's house in record time. We walked up and found her in her rose garden, muttering to herself. Hey, Betty, I called out. Oh, stupid thorns. Darn skin of mine getting thinner every year. Betty? I asked as we got closer, not sure if she had heard me. Oh, hey, kiddo. Are you all right? I'm fine. Just nicked myself on a pretty nasty thorn here. She pointed to a large thorn on an outwardly growing branch. Ouch. Want me to run in and get you a Band-Aid? I asked. No need. Ran out a few days ago. I'll make do. As she spoke, dribbles of blood ran down her forearm. That looks pretty bad, Betty. You're gonna need to bandage it somehow. Ugh, she grunted and waved me away like she was shooing a pesky fly. I'll be all right. I can always tell George to add some to my next delivery. When does that come in? Sunday. Betty, I scolded. It's Wednesday. You can't wait that long. Yes, I can, she insisted. Look, Mrs. Mom wanted me to pick up some olive oil on the way home today anyways. Why don't we just go together? We'll make it a fun, quick trip, I pleaded. No. I don't like going to the market. I'll wait for the delivery, she said, waving me away again. Come on. I bet you don't like going by yourself, huh? This time, me and Lucy will be with you, so you don't have to worry. Ah, she grunted. It took a special blend of badgering and bugging, with just a hint of pestering to get Betty to go to the market with us. But it worked. It was a short walk from Betty's house to the market. If you think of the neighborhood as a capital T shape, our house was on the top left, and the market was on the top right. Betty's house was halfway down the stem of the T, and a short diagonal walk to the market. On the way, she told us how the neighborhood was originally built to accommodate travel by horse, and the majority of properties here had been either ranches or farms. That's why there are so many dirt roads still, she explained. Most of us don't use our cars anyways, so there's never been a real push to pave them over the years. Dirt is softer for horse joints anyways. It's not as hard on their bones. Do you think that's how I found the pathway in the oaks behind our houses? For horses? I asked. Of course. There's a whole network of trails running from property to property. I'm sure it was a little overgrown when you found it, but it's a pretty common sight in this area. That makes sense, I agreed. In no time, we began to see the familiar, dilapidated wooden siding of the building come into view. Audrey's laugh could be heard faintly in the distance. Betty's demeanor began to ramp up into a fidgety frenzy as we got closer to the market, though. Looking down, I noticed her fingers flying about like they were playing an imaginary piano. Betty noticed me observing her movements and quickly pulled her hands up and buried them in crossed arms across her chest. Sheepishly, I smiled and continued walking. Do my eyes deceive me, or is that Miss Betty I see walking through my doorway? Audrey called out as we entered the small building. Yes, Audrey, it's me, Betty said. Dragged here against my will, she mentioned under her breath as she gave me a smirk. My, and with the famous duo too? Audrey said as the customer she was helping walked away. What brings y'all in today? This one's stubbornness, Betty claimed, pointing at me through a nod of her head. Betty got scraped by a thorn, and she's been out of bandages for who knows how long. Oh, and Mrs. Mom needs some olive oil, too. Is that right? Audrey asked as she inspected Betty. Let me take a look. Betty reluctantly uncrossed her arms and revealed the long scratch just below her elbow. The blood had stopped sometime during the walk, but not before a mess had been made on her shirt and her other arm. Oh, Miss Betty. Have a seat. We'll get this cleaned up in no time. Betty grunted before reluctantly moving toward the sitting area in the cafe at the other end of the building. Lucy, go sit with Betty. I'll be right back, I whispered. As I made my way through the aisles, I could hear Audrey peppering Betty with questions and concerns about her gardening habits, what precautions she should take to ensure fewer incidents like this, and the rate of infections in the elderly population. I peeked out of the aisle in time to see Betty roll her eyes while Audrey was looking down, attending the wound. I chuckled to myself as I made my way to the roll of familiar bottles of olive oil and picked out the one Mrs. Mom always used. George came out from the back room and gave me a polite smile as he passed on the way to the corner to help the other customers. Thank you, dear, for the unnecessary doting, but I'm perfectly capable of handling myself, I heard Betty say with just the slightest hint of annoyance. Well, I just want you to be safe, seeing as you're all alone in that big old house of yours. Audrey's southern drawl reverberated against the walls of the small market. Oh, how cute! Is this your dog? What's its name? Is it friendly? Can I pet it? What kind of dog is it? Two unfamiliar voices rang out. Knowing that they were talking about Lucy and hearing the annoyance in Betty's voice earlier, I figured it was time to head back to the table. That's Lucy. She's my cow pig, I stated firmly as I got within earshot of the couple that had crowded around Betty and Lucy's table. Betty, who had just opened her mouth to give a response, looked at me with a grateful gleam in her eye before settling back into her chair. Audrey, being done with bandaging Betty's arm, had cleaned up the table and was heading to the back room. As she passed me, she gave me a knowing wink as she tried to contain her laughter. A cow pig? The woman asked. I nodded. Mrs. Mom paid a lot of money to get her for me. As I performed my usual explanation of what a cow pig was, the man had turned to examine Betty. Is that Miss Betty? He asked. Oh my word, it is! Miss Betty, it's me! Betty turned and glanced at the man with furrowed eyebrows before quickly turning away again. It's me, he insisted. Johnny Jr. I used to play with Jimmy all the time when... No, she shouted abruptly. You're mistaken, young man. Go away now, she said as she shooed him away with a wave of her hand. No, I remember your hat, the one you're wearing now, he continued. Audrey had returned and handed me a fresh box of bandages. For Miss Betty, she said. Turning to look at the woman, she asked, Never seen anything like a cow pig myself, but she's just the sweetest thing. Audrey bent down and gave Lucy some much appreciated chin scratches. With all the different conversations going on, I found it difficult to find my bearings in the muddled and overwhelming noise in that small building. Words bombarded me from every angle, and I couldn't sort them out in time to make sense of what was being said, let alone which words were directed at me. Before I knew it, a sharp shriek shredded through the commotion. In the ensuing silence, everyone stopped to look at the source, including Lucy and me. Enough! Betty's shrill voice rang out. I do not know why you enjoy badgering elderly women, but please, please leave me be. Betty got up from her chair, waving her hands furiously as the man made a desperate attempt to reach an understanding with her. Betty, just give me a moment. We're next in line, I urged. No. I've had enough of it here. I'm going home. She threw her hands up in the air, knocking some items off a shelf in the process. They crashed onto the floor around her, upsetting her even more. Ugh! She screamed as she hastily left through the front door. That's Betty for you, Audrey scoffed once Betty was through the doorway. It's so much nicer after she's left, isn't it? The couple in front of me gave a little snicker before muttering utterances of agreement. Shocked at Audrey's cruel comment and the couple's response, I pushed past both of them and dropped the crumpled wad of dollars on the counter, giving them all a stern look of disapproval when I turned around. Come on, Lucy, I said as I put the olive oil and bandages in her vest pockets. Hedy, your change? I heard George ask as we exited. Put it on our tab, I yelled over my shoulder. I caught Audrey shrugging her shoulders before attending to the mess. Normally, I would have gone back and helped clean up, but their rude comments about Betty were infuriating. The back of my neck started to heat up with frustration as I ran towards Betty. It didn't take long before I caught up with her. She was muttering annoyances to herself about how she hated people and crowds. She stopped talking as soon as she saw me next to her. That's the last time I'm going to that place with you, she said firmly. I could see the intensity of fear behind her eyes, even though she was trying to act tough. The sunlight glistened on the tears wavering precariously on her bottom eyelids. It softened me. Of course. Don't worry, we won't be going back there again, I mentioned quickly. A smile of relief crept into the corners of her mouth, and her eyebrows softened in a moment of mutual understanding before disappearing in a flash. She quickly faced forward, raised her chin, took a deep breath in, and took my arm in hers. We walked back in silence, but with the biggest smiles on our faces. Hey there, it's Hedy. Do you want to join our H&B secret society? I might even be able to convince Betty to share her famous butterfly PT recipe with you. We'll see about that. For now, head on over to laurennicole.art/stories to see how you can get your official member badge. See you soon. Thank you for joining us on this episode of What We Keep Hidden. Tune in next time to see what Hedy and Lucy get into next. What We Keep Hidden is written, narrated, and produced by Lauren Nicole. This has been a Lauren Nicole creation.